2004, a military-grade code generator was hidden inside RubiGen rails by its core team for a crime it didn't commit. This generator promptly escaped its maximum security subversion repository to the RubiForge underground. Today, despite an MIT license, it survives as a project of fortune. If you need a generator, if no one else can help, and if you can find out how it works, maybe you can hire RubiGen.
It's being 9 o'clock on a Sunday and we're all in the same room. It was plainly obvious to me that this is, of course, a keynote. So I thought I'd put a little extra in. One of my favourite parts of Rails is the fact that I don't have to do a lot of the work to get a lot done. And it looks really impressive. Type a few generator commands in and a whole bunch of fancy stuff happens. I've been fascinated by it. And ever since I've discovered how to make it work and how to write my own generators, I knew I had to get it out of Rails and to be able to use it in other projects. So I have a project called NewGem, which generates a scaffolding for gems, and it was a complete prick of a thing to work with. Because, can you say that in this country? I just don't want to get caught at customs on the way back out, that's all. And because it was just one great big long file of make ders and file copies, the file opens. And it was awful, awful, awful. And so it was on my big list of things to do, was to extract it out. And I'll talk about who built it and its background and everything, but ultimately, this is sort of its coming out party. This is a bunch of projects have got this implemented, and hopefully a whole bunch more start to use this so that they are... when you release a project and it has some sort of basic scaffolding that your users are going to use it for, that it's going to make it a whole lot easier to implement this stuff. So, it's entertainment to no end. You'd be surprised. This project, well, I'll put the Keynote file up. It's 178 meg. So I look forward to it. If I put it up now and you'll start downloading it, then perhaps you could stop twittering, etc. So Rails comes in 6 parts. The 5 that actually do something useful, and the one that sort of you need to download the rest, which is the Rails gem. Now, it actually does some interesting stuff, like other than the dependency part, because you all remember when you first get to Ruby and you first learn Rails, and you just don't understand why Rails isn't already in Ruby. And you just, what this whole gem install, you just don't get it. And eventually you figure it out because you're intelligent. But other than that, that's what the Rails gem does. It also has the boot initializer code. It has the fancy scripts and the wonderful rate tasks, and the plugin loader. The other part of it is the generator part. And it's awesome. It's the part that you run when you run the Rails command. It's whenever you do the script generate model, script generate controller. Obviously, it comes with a bunch of built-in generators, but most importantly, it allows you to, in a variety of pretty fancy ways, to build your own. On the railscast.com website by Ryan Bates, there's a video on how to make your own generator. He does it in your own local folder, but you can also do it inside the vendor plugins, inside generator, inside vendor generator, and a bunch of other different places in gems. And it seemed obvious that the 18 boys needed to fix this problem. Is that readable? So the 18 knew they had limited time, limited resources, but they had to come up with something fast. Steal it from Rails. Fonts are too big and had to do it all on one page, so unfortunately. So you can use this on any legacy. So if you're running MERB or anything else, you can install this on your old legacy apps. Even though the new version of MERB, for example, is coming out and it's going to have all this stuff integrated, you can still start to play around with this. And here's a bit of a demo on how you might run this with on an old legacy MERB app. This is an awesome presentation from my perspective. A lot of it's just video. So I might just have a sit down and just let me know how it's going. So essentially we're going to do a blog because there aren't enough of them in the world. I'm pretty thinking the next sort of killer demo app is going to be Facebook. You know, do MERB -G Facebook or social network. Okay, so now what we're doing is just installing the generators, and we specified a scope called MERB, and I'll talk about what that means. Now, it's not that impressive at this juncture because there aren't actually any MERB generators at the time I wrote this. But, notably, there aren't any Rails generators, which might sound not that special, but that's kind of ridiculous to see them. So, our character doesn't understand why there are any MERB generators, but that's all right. We're going to make some. Relatively pointless action scene. I had a lot of fun. Okay, so let's actually do it properly now. Okay, so what we're going to do is build a gem containing a generator. So this is whether it's for MERB, for Ruby Coco, for Ruby Gems, or for Rails. This is pretty much the process you're going to go through. Again, this follows along similarly to how Ryan did his video, except we're going to cheat because that's where life's at. So when you do gems, if you use new gem or later on we'll talk about some other ways, there's a generator, because I love the meta-ness of that, sort of the recursiveness of gems generating other gems, entertains me. And so we've got lots of help instructions because I forget how this works. So I thought I should write lots of instructions. I never knew if anyone else was going to use it, so pretty much they are for me. So what we're doing here is we're going to create a generator called model. So when we use it, we're going to type script generate model, and we're specifying that it's for MERB. And so you can see that there's a MERB, sort of halfway down on the file list, there's a thing called MERB generators. Again, if you're doing a Rails, there'd be Rails generators. If you're doing Ruby Coco, it'd be Ruby Coco generators. This is just filling in the spec, the gem spec stuff using Ho. Well, not Ho's down the bottom. Okay, so this is now what we're going to do is test-driven development of gems, of generators. Fortunately, someone has written a bunch of helper files in Rails. A couple of the Rails generators use them. They actually got tests for them. A lot of the generators in Rails don't, so that's on the to-do list. But yeah, so there's some nice helpers just to make sure that certain files get generated, certain folders get generated, certain files have classes and methods inside them. So yeah, we're just going to test that I have, while it does that, I have the A-Team theme ingrained in my head after having worked on this for the last 2 weeks. And I'm looking forward, 20 minutes from now when I finish, to put it all behind me. I don't know, get a different theme song in my life. Okay, so we're running an auto test to make sure it fails. And now we're actually going to go and actually do the generator. So this is, again, this looks just like Rails. The difference is it's got a different subclass, which is a small complication with the integration into Rails. But we'll fix that one day. So the way, if you need to generate, is the way that pretty much it's an ERB for the templates. You're using ERB, and it can access any method on this class. I don't think it works on instance variables, so you sort of have to wrap them around as attribute readers. We're just going to set them up, camelize, and file name will be underscore. I've seen this so many times. So the first parameter there is the file that's going to be in the templates folder, and the second one is the name of where it's going to go in the target when you run the script. I can see it. It's looking really good. Okay, so the test now is showing that it's looking for a merb.rb.erb. The reason I go with, it's just pure preference. .erb, a couple of more and more text editors are supporting .erb as an extension that they know what to do with. It looks pretty. Mine doesn't, but some do. Seems like a good naming convention. Again, this, if you've done generators before, then this is just standard stuff. It's just nice having a generator to give you the basic scaffolding for doing it. Again, it gives you the test file, so it sort of encourages you to write tests, and it's all working, which is pretty fancy. You can also do a test to make sure that there is a class inside. So there's a helper just to clean up the manifest. If you've ever done anything with Ho, then you'll know that there's a manifest file to tell you which of the files need to be deployed. Okay, so we've deployed our A-Team. Now, we don't have to specify anywhere that we want to get things from the A-Team gem. The way RubiGen works is it looks through every gem whenever you run the script. So now let's go back to our blog app. Let's see the magic happen. Oh. Well, it entertained me. And we can even demo it because that would seem like an appropriate thing to do. Yeah, a bit of a story. I did a Gmail clone, and when I first learned Rails, I thought that'd be cool, and I did it, and I showed it to my friend, and he was uniquely unimpressed with it. I say uniquely because I didn't show it to anyone else after that, and the reason he was unimpressed was because it looked just like Gmail. And I can imagine that you're having pretty much the same experience right about now. You're thinking, well, that's great. That looks just like Rails. But that's the point, all right? I just want to reinforce that. I stole all this code. I'm not trying to take credit for this being clever. This is awesome code, and all I wanted to do was to extract it out and give it to the increasing number of Ruby projects that have frameworks that and development environments. Okay, so the notion is there's a thing called, I call them scopes. And essentially what it is it represents that if you're working in Merb, in a Merb app, you don't want to see Rails generators or RubiGen generators or anything else. You want Merb ones. And so it's kind of a one-to-one. A given generator can only belong to a certain scope because it's based on folder. So you stick it in a Merb generators folder. And you don't really need to remember this because you run the component generators generator, and it does it for you. Okay? So RubiGems, if you're writing them for Ruby, if you're developing RubiGems and you want some fancy generators to make your life better, then they go obviously in RubiGems generators. And I'm going to get tongue-tied. So There are some things in life that aren't necessarily frameworks, but they're horizontal, that support perhaps your environment. So RSpec, for example, you might want to have generators for all the different types of frameworks. So the idea here is that because the scopes allow to be mutually exclusive, I could have the same name for my generator regardless, because at the time that I'm inside Ruby Coco, the time that I'm inside Rails, it's only going to see the appropriate one anyway. So there's no conflict. Having said that, this is not, that particular demonstration is not how I'd probably share RSpec generators. I would actually put them back into the Rails environment, or a Rails gem, or a Merb gem, or a Ruby Coco gem, and let those particular framework people manage it. Just wanted to sort of demonstrate that they sort of sit differently. Okay. We have everyone, the only person we really have to thank for all this is Jeremy Kemper, because he is awesome. Except that, he destroyed CD Baby, which we lost all our credibility because some dorky PHP man thought he'd just go and rewrite another framework, because that's what... Anyway, I think Jeremy's awesome, and I'm sure that's all that matters to Jeremy. Is he here? Sorry? Where's he coming from? What, there aren't more flights? Anyway. Oh, there's one flight to, Charlotte a year? What? Anyway. So the way it currently works is because there's a different subclass, you kind of got to use Rails generators in Rails land, and anywhere else you can use RubiGen. But that's something I'll work on. I just don't have a solution for it yet. And hence the test harness is going to be slightly different. Now, one thing. There's a bunch of... I've mentioned a couple of ways you can pick up gems in Rails. But another way you can pick it up is in Ruby gems. Now, originally in 1.2.3, the only way you could get generators from gems, God, it's so hard to say, is if you had a gem that ended with the word generator. Now, to me, that was grossly unfair from a namespacing perspective. To declare that any gem that ended with _generator was a Rails generator meant that you couldn't go around, it was basically just declaring that's our namespace. Piss off. And I didn't think that was very nice. Anyway, that still exists, and I don't know how we're ever going to get rid of that. But what you can do now is you can now put generators inside Rails _generators. So you can put as many generators as you like in a given gem, as opposed to having to have one gem per generator. And so, and again, the reason that patch went in is because I had this cunning plan. And I like a good cunning plan. Okay, the other thing is because now RubiGen's under my subversion repository, I can add anything to it I like. So it's got a bunch of other things that I found helpful along the way, which I'll refactor back into Rails, we have this plan for, world domination, obviously, because that's where all good plans end up. But, yeah, plans perhaps get rid of the Rails generator completely and just reference this. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so in the last month or so, it's been integrated into a bunch of different things. I did the patches for Merb and for Ruby Coco, but AirRake just happened, he wrote to the mailing list and said, I've used it in AirRake, look at me. And it was awesome. I mean, that really impressed me because I didn't know it existed. Okay, now Merb. So if you're using Merb, hopefully you're on the edge because there's a whole bunch of fancy stuff going on trunk at the moment. Is there a date for 0.4? It's a bit like Ruby 1.9, is it? Sometime before Christmas? No, there's lots of cool stuff, and I'll do a demo in a minute. But essentially, it's all done with RubiGen, which means that, and there's a growing number of actual generators you can use. Okay, and that's been done by a guy in Australia, Daniel. So I love the illusion of live coding without the effort. Actually, it just takes a whole lot more effort. You've got to do the little cut and paste and get rid of all your errors, so you look like you know what you're doing. You have a brilliant opportunity to look like an expert coder. Never make a mistake. Okay, Now the way MERB's moving towards is separating everything out into separate to rep, so you can have different dependencies for different ORMs and different test environments. So a whole bunch of stuff's going out into a separate gem for MERB, for active record. So look at that. These guys are having a field day now that they've got generator. Originally it used to just generate a bunch of folders, and that was it. And pretty much you have to do everything else yourself. Now that it's incredible. Every time you do an SVN up, the generator's been extended. So because we've got the two gems, there's a bunch of generators. So active record model is the one we'll sort of show off. Again, kind of irrelevant to show what it looks like, because you'd expect it to look something along the lines of what the Rails one does. Ergo, the Gmail clone tragedy. Anyone wants a copy of my Gmail clone from 2 years ago, when it was back in Rails 1.0? Didn't even use RJS. It's really awful. That's really explicit. Anyway, it's free. Okay, the interesting thing. It by default, it's generating a spec, an RSpec spec. And but it's completely optional. You can, I'll wait until it catches up to my train of thought. Okay, so obviously it generated the fancy migration. Now I'll go back into my monologue. So you can actually use the same generator, but to get test units. And so here it's showing where the specs are actually, where the scopes are actually being defined. In the generator script itself, it says what scopes you want to work with. And so we had MERB and RSpec. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it in the application itself, get rid of RSpec, put test unit, and run the same generator again, and it will do something different. Now this is just an idea I gave these guys because I didn't have time, and they've gone off and they're having a field day. Okay, so now it's going to demonstrate, because I figured there's a pretty good chance to demonstrate what's going on in MERB. So now you need to go and unhook a bunch of dependencies. Uncomment and bring online a specific ORM you want to use. So you've got SQL, active record, and data mapper, so we'll just use the active record one. Now it's going to complain that we don't have a database file, but that's really helpful. At least it then goes and creates a sample for you. I don't know if the user is deliberately misspelt, but... And now it works. No, it doesn't work. I can't remember our own presentation. Because we've already generated a post, it's a bit like Rails. It says, oh, you've already used that class, therefore it assumes it's reserved, which is kind of an odd concept. But anyway, so we delete it and run it again. And now it works. And now it's generating test units. And so this is an idea that I want to sort of codify, but MERB's sort of leading the way. And it's that idea of generators being more templates for an idea. So instead of having an RSpec model, as we do in Rails if you're using RSpec, you could have just model, but it would pick up the RSpec component as opposed to doing the test unit component. So hopefully I'll get to refactor that back into Rails, because I think that's a pretty cool idea. If you think it's a crap idea, then let me know and I just won't bother. Okay, the other thing, this is why I wrote it in the first place, because I was just sick and tired of my original NewGem solution. And so NewGem is a way of creating like a scaffold for gems. It's quite it verges on excessive in the amount of crap it spews out, but it's handy. And but it also contains a bunch of cool generators that we saw before. Ruby Coco is now in Leopard. I missed the demo of it yesterday, but I saw a demo of it a couple of months ago, and it's awesome. It looks so fancy. But now it's been driven. Now there's generators for this stuff. The generators are distributed as a gem. Ruby Coco is distributed as a DMG or installed in Leopard. And but yeah, so running this thing called Ricola. So Aloy is a Dutch guy, and he's done me a little demo. It's a little probably hard to read, so I'll read out to you. Hello, RubyConf. I can't do the Dutch accent, though. I'm glad to be... I won't even try. I'm desperate to want to try, because I think it would be funny. But anyway, I'm glad to be able to attend in one way or another. So let's see what RubiGen can do for you. I doubt this is the way he was thinking of saying it, but... I've got the microphone. At the moment, we use the default app generator, which I'll demonstrate in a second, with just a few templates. So we are able to get an app generator up and running in no time. It's misspelled. I shouldn't pick on him. He's not here. I mean, that's just awesome. And so previously you would have gone and done it through the Xcode or whatever. But now it gives you a whole bunch of cool stuff. And it works off the bat. So now we have a working app already. Woo, look at that. I'd make an awesome sports caller. Oh yeah, so we have an app generator in action. That's a component generator. So component generators are the model, controller. So he's written a couple of them. But more importantly, people can go and, if they're using Ruby Coco now, they can go and write their own gems for their own, either their own purposes, if they have specific generators they want, or things they can share. I don't do Ruby Coco, so I've got no idea what he's doing here. It's like black magic. Okay, we have 2 windows. I mean, it's very impressive. I'm sure it can probably do 3 windows if you wanted to. No. That's the downside of someone in another continent doing it for you. No hands. Of course, you can. You can watch it later. Of course, you can add options to your generator for more details. I'll just create a dummy controller and add multiple nibs, etc., etc. It was very nice of him to do the presentation. Basically, that's it. You can make life you can make life of yourself and your users much easier by providing generators. God, it's like I wrote this myself. That's not true. But this is the point. If you're writing a new framework, like for example, in an hour or so, Jay Phil's going to do adhesion, and when you use adhesion, you generate a structure. Now, he's currently not using this, but that's the kind of scenario where this sort of thing is really, really handy. Okay, so now we're going to do a little demo that says something because, so that's loading up the speech synthesizer, so that should be exciting. It's like I don't know what's going to happen. Start speaking string. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have a window, a text field, and this has got nothing to do with RubiGen. It's cool. Ruby Coco is awesome. So now we go back in, connect it all up, get ourselves a little text box, we get ourselves a button. Yeah, we've really come along in user interface design, haven't we? Still got text boxes and buttons. It's obviously a winning solution. We link them up. But I saw him do a demonstration of similar stuff before, and it took a lot longer. RubiGen, I don't need to tell you. The computer's going to say it for me. I should do it.
RubiGen kicks ass. Have yours kick too. Enjoy the rest of RubyConf. Peace out.
Oh, it's awesome. Okay, and finally, air rake. Basically, if you're doing air, so that's the Apollo thing, some rate task generators. And again, you generate and you destroy things so that if you wanted to have generators, they're claiming the scope of air. So basically, it would go under air_generators. And Gabriel is organising that. And I thought I'd take this testimonial because it's made me feel a little warm and gooey inside. All right. So, more importantly, is if you want to do your own framework. Again, so this is the process. I want to sit down with Jay. We'll look at doing this for adhesion, and so where you might want to have some sort of command to generate a bunch of stuff, and then it, by default, when you start to work in that environment, specifies a scope and pulls in generators from it that are specified. So that would be a bunch of work. So I wrote a generator for that. Yeah, it's cool. So you get that, like it's a gem containing a generator that creates another gem with a generator inside it that creates applications. You can use generators to generate parts of the application. It's a bit more obtainable. Now, do I have the pleasure of Ryan being in the room? Is Ryan here? No Ryan? Oh, that's awesome. Eric? No Eric? No Ryan? Sweet. Ho is wonderful. It's the best productivity tool for doing gems that I know of. And it comes with a little application called So, which is like a competitor to RubiGen, so to speak, in such a way that Ryan thinks that mine's stupid. And but that's fine, I don't care. And but it, like RubiGen, uses basically make dir and file open, and it has all the same problems that RubiGen has. Now, he didn't say that, but I can imagine if he was here, he would. So I thought I'd cartoonify him. All right, so let's go and do this. This is useful. If you're ever, for any framework you ever create, this is the process you're going to go through. First, we're just going to have a look at that So itself. So, like I said, it creates a scaffold for your application. I don't know why it camel cases the name. It's a bit odd. Anyway, it's irrelevant. Oh, that's fixed by the end of this. And like mine, well, actually, new gem used to just destroy your previous gem if you ran it again, which is perhaps a little unfair. Okay, so this is the basic thing it generates. So what we're going to try and do is reproduce that with RubiGen. So let's go to the Ho gem. Ho is actually kind of awkward to work on. It's using the Preforce repository. I'm not very good at it. Anyway. So yeah, it does does a couple of things that I can't be bothered demonstrating. But look at that, all that inline text. Mine used to do that. It's pain in the bum. So we're just going to rename that just for keeping it around. But now we're going to recreate it. Now, so Ho doesn't currently have access to all the RubiGem generators, so we'll just give those to it. And now that we've got those, we can go and create our application generator. Look at them all. So we want to create one called So, because that's what it was already called. And it's going to be creating a RubiGem environment. So that's the scope we want to specify. We don't want a scope of So or anything. We just want it to be RubiGem. This happens to be called So. Okay. And it looks just like a component generator. It's just different setup. Essentially, the setup is an executable file as opposed to the generator. So we're going to do a test-driven development. I do skip ahead slightly here because it does get a little bit boring. Well, if you want to see me do it live, it takes a lot longer. What was I thinking at this juncture? Oh, yeah. And this is great because now it really specifies for you, what you're expecting this generator to do. I started cheating at this point. Okay, so a little bit of auto test. Because we've learnt the moral of RubyConf 2007 is use auto test, isn't it? Now, the error that came out is it kind of works on the assumption that you've got a test helper file, because often you do. Ho doesn't, so we'll just cut that out. Okay, so now we've got real failures, which is great. So now let's get cracking. Go back to our generator. Down the bottom, I just sort of figured, this is pretty much how the Rails was done. It just has a collection of base birds that you want. There's no way to make this more interesting, I've got to be honest. Racked my brain. Anyway, so now we're going to get cracking. So essentially what we're just doing what Ryan was doing before, which is creating files, except we're going to use ERB because that's the way it works. And instead of doing inline the text, we're going to put the text off in files. And I skip ahead pretty much because, the Oscars, the call-off music. I was listening to that. Now, so it gets, right, okay, so in the meantime, whilst you weren't watching, I created the lib and the test, and now we're really cheating. Now we've got rake, history, manifest. That's a new helper. And it all works magically. Like, you just missed a whole bunch of stuff. Because it was, in my mind, at midnight last night, it was really getting dull. And I'm trying to save you, so I thought, I'll spend the time, instead of showing the actual code, I'll spend the time apologising for not showing. Okay, that's Ho, showing you that Ho uses itself to deploy itself. God, I love recursion. That's a cheat to fix up your manifest. The manifest is a good idea. Just, when you've got truckload changes to make to it. Okay, so now we go back, and we'll go and create we'll use So to create a new app, a new gem. Now it looks impressive. All clean and happy. Okay, small problem. And this was a bug, and I fixed the bug, and I thought, no, I'll take the opportunity. I won't just fix the video. I'll take the opportunity to demonstrate something. So the problem was that it hasn't specified the correct scope. Even though when we ran the generator, we said we wanted to be RubiGen, it's gone off and put So there, and that's wrong because there are no generated. All the generators you might want to use after having run So would be RubiGen related ones. So let's go and fix the generator up so that people don't have this problem in the future. And here down the bottom, so the way it works is that it actually uses dependencies. I love dependencies. I love to go. It's basically dependencies as a way of encapsulating chunks of generation. You write a small generator and then you reuse it through dependencies. Again, this is stuff that was in Rails, and you see a lot now with the new scaffold. Well, yeah, the scaffold, all models been pulled off, and then it just uses that. Okay? We rerun it, and now it's all good. Now we have our generators. So now So if you like So, you think that's a more minimalistic way to go, it's still producing the same stuff, except now it's going to have generators so you can move on with your life. And I just thought it was fun to change Ryan's code live. Okay, a couple of things left on the to-do list of relative importance. One is I want to get rid of Rails generator. It's not that it's wrong. I just think it's best not in the Rails, in the Rails gem itself. The generator, the actual generators themselves, model controller, of course, they can all stay there. Again, this is my opinion. There's a base class called nameBase that can stay there because that's very Rails. Well, to my mind, it's Rails specific. Got lots and lots of little things to get set up. But the rest of it can be ripped out, and as it has. And I don't know the best way about going this. I haven't talked to Jeremy, of course. Jeremy's busy sleeping at the moment, so he's not here to talk about this. So I'll just tell you what I think. You can, tell me I'm wrong. The other thing is, I want to codify. I want to have a look at what Nerve did and see if there's any interesting patterns to be extracted on basically what they've done with the test unit versus RSpec idea. If there's a cleaner. Bit of a detention seeker, eh? Because now there's going to be, what is it? Is it your laptop or your iPhone or your mobile, your pacemaker? I want to sort that out because I think there's some interesting ideas there so that you don't have to have different generator names and completely different generators just to be able to have variations. So now you can just pick different dependencies. And like all good A-Team episodes, it always ends with Hannibal sitting back, cigar in the mouth. I love it when a plan comes together. Thank you very much.